to date with information you can use.
Bobo 89.1 FM.
The views and opinions expressed by the following program and its participants are solely their current opinions and do not reflect the opinions of Bobo 89.1 FM and DMS Broadcasting respective stations. The program participants' opinions are based upon information they consider reliable and based on their knowledge.
The Family Resource Center invite you to join us Tuesday nights at 8 p.m. on Bobo 89.1 FM for our weekly show called Rethink Parenting, where we share practical and positive parenting information to support happy, healthy family life. We'll share how to handle day-to-day issues. We'll address common challenges with parenting, such as how to manage misbehavior, supporting our teens through growing up, managing co-parenting dynamics, and how to take care of ourselves and manage our own stressors. Family Resource Center, committed to building people, building families. Tune in Tuesday nights, 8 p.m. on Bobo 89.1 FM. Find us at frc.gov.ky or call us on 949-0006. Submit your questions and concerns regarding parenting to us, and we'll share them on air. Join us Tuesday nights at 8 p.m. for our weekly show called Rethink Parenting.
Welcome, parents, and thank you for joining us, the Family Resource Center team, for another episode of Rethink Parenting. We're here every Tuesday on Bobo 89.1 FM. My name is Rachael Manderson, and I'm a parent facilitator with the Family Resource Center, and I'll be joined tonight by Miss Anoush from the Infinite Mindcare.
Thank you all for joining in tonight. It's likely then that you caught a glimpse of our flyer and you caught your interest. You know, you either maybe could be experiencing some challenges with parenting your teens, or maybe you're just looking for some, quick tips and tricks on trying to establish a better relationship or connect with your teenager. So for tonight, just looking at our outline, we're going to start off with just a little bit of understanding the teen brain. Biologically, what are they going through right now, and changes in their development that could be contributing to their behavior. From there, we'll just touch on a couple of, common challenges that many teen parents are facing, and then going into some strategies on what can support you with parenting your teen. And our second half will be bringing in our guest speaker, Ms. Anoush from Infinite Mindcare. She'll be just lending a little bit more on her expertise in terms of what to look for when some of these common behaviors become more of a clinical issue. What as parents are we looking for? What are some signs and symptoms, and what can we do to support and address these issues with our teens? So we'll go ahead and get started.
You may become a legal adult when you're 18, but
what we have here is just a quick video. What happened to my kids? So you might be taking a second here just to ask yourself, what happened to the sweet little young boy and girl that I had? What changed? Once was cuddles and long chats have now turned into emotional outbursts or radio silence. So what we have here is just a quick little video. I apologize because she's a quick speaker, but it's just a little bit of insight in terms of some of the brain changes and developments that our teens are going through. So just have a quick look here.
Trying to say, you may become a legal adult when you're 18, but scientists say, 18, a grown-up? Yeah, right. Hey everyone, Lacey Green here for D News. Question, when does someone grow up? It's a philosophical question. It could have to do with the life experiences someone has and the wisdom they gain from those experiences. It's also a scientific question. Being a grown-up is related to how mature you are, or more specifically, how developed your brain is. For years, scientists have known that the human brain is not fully developed until around the age of 25. Although we have all of our gray matter, which includes cell bodies and neurons, nerve fibers, and support cells, by the time we're 12, it takes more than a decade for all that matter to become fully wired and pruned for efficiency. So this is a process called neuromaturation, and scientists believe it's the reason why teens in general, share some common behaviors. So I'm talking about things like sensation-seeking, risk-taking, and needing to be accepted by their peers. So the teenage brain is going through a lot of critical transformations, particularly in the prefrontal cortex, which is one of the last areas of the brain to fully mature. It's responsible for executive functions like goal setting, paying attention, motivation, planning, understanding, understanding consequences, and having self-control. So the fact that these functions are underdeveloped is part of why teenagers tend to engage in risky and impulsive behaviors like experimenting with drugs and alcohol, having unprotected sex, speeding, and doing stupid things that drive their parents a little cray-cray. Right around puberty, the brain's dopaminergic reward centers also become highly active and slowly wither out as you become an adult. This makes teenagers especially prone to peer pressure. The reward centers are super sensitive to social approval or disapproval. One study found that a 20-year-old was 50% more likely than a fully grown adult to do something risky if two peers were watching. Scientists have also found that brain circuitry responsible for emotional responses are changing, making teens more responsive to emotionally loaded situations than both children and adults. So teenagers might seem like they're being really dramatic with their emotions, but the reality is they're experiencing them very intensely. They're also experiencing a lot of feelings for the first time, which can exaggerate their intensity further. Intellectually speaking, the capacity to learn will never be as high as it is when you're a teenager, and their intellectual power and ability to do mental tasks is already right up there with adults. So I think there's a tendency for grown-ups to become impatient and dismiss teens as stupid, immature, and incapable, but it helps to remember that teens are undergoing a lot of neurodevelopment. It's all a part of the natural process where a human moves from dependence on caregivers to an independent, fully functional adult, which is obviously a really important time and, in my opinion, is well deserving of a little extra love and patience. Thanks.
All right. And like I said, she's a quick talker, so it might be a little challenging to kind of keep up with her speed. But basically, what she's talking about is the kind of the critical developments that our teens are going through right now. They're going through this process of maturation and pruning in which their capacity to learn is actually at its highest. So they're beginning to identify their passions, discovering what they like, what they dislike. They're starting to dedicate time to activities that they enjoy and maybe experimenting with things that have maybe triggered or sparked their interest. But at the same time as this learning process is taking place, there's that critical function in the brain in which our capacity for consequential thinking and to make those sound decisions, our sense of judgment, our self-control, that emotional regulation, are typically underdeveloped at this stage. Also, their reward centers are much more sensitive. So typical emotions that we experience in a day-to-day, they might have a more sensitive reaction and experiencing those emotions much more intensely. So these considering all of these changes in development, we can see why this can contribute to why teens might engage in some of those common yet more risky behaviors and also struggling to manage their emotions. So I want to share with you next here is a model known as the V of love. And what this is looking at here is, considering all the development stuff that's happening in the brain, kids also have this sense and this yearning for their own independence and their freedom. So as parents, it could be very challenging to try to balance our duty as parents to protect our children from this big, wild world that's out there, while at the same time trying to nurture their own independence. So this V of love model is basically outlining how a child's freedom, their choices, their responsibilities in life kind of increase with age. So as parents, we see how our own development has to take place because, at a younger age, those boundaries, those limits that we set on children are much tighter and much more structured. So that sense of responsibility for our toddlers, our preschoolers, and their freedom to pick and choose what they're going to do is their options are much more narrow. But as our child starts to get older and they are starting to demonstrate this ability, showing this maturity and showing this ability to show that they can be responsible and to manage some of those freedoms, we as parents also have to adjust our structure. We have to be willing to open up those boundaries and those limits and allowing our teenagers to be able to make some choices, to take on more responsibility for themselves, and also to have that little bit more flexibility with freedom. Now, at the same time, if you notice, this V is still there. So there are still boundaries and there are still limits that need to be in place, because just because we are allowing and we are expanding those freedoms and those choices, it doesn't mean that the structure and the guidance of a parent is not necessary. So if we're looking here kind of as an example, as a toddler, you might be picking that book, picking what they're going to read. But you're giving them the choice of, well, you can sit on the floor, you can sit on my lap. As you're progressing, you're looking at where they might want to do their homework, but you're still setting those times and the expectations of when and how they're going to do that. But we're looking at a teenager. The expectation is simply that they're going to get this homework done, but you're going to choose when and how you're going to do it. So you can see how that sense of responsibility of what they have to complete is there, but they have more choice and freedom as to how they're going to do it. But they're still at structure that is set by the parent. So when we're looking at choices can range from something like your homework or preferences of clothes, how you're going to spend your little bit of pocket money, going out with friends or our hairstyles, the choices of sports and extracurricular activities that we might want to engage in. These are some areas that we might be trying to look at how we broaden that sense of responsibility and choices for our teenagers. So with parents at this point, though, it can be very challenging in terms of, okay, well, how do I kind of set this? How do I find the balance? How do I find the balance of allowing my child the freedom to have their independence while also managing my role as a parent? How do I enforce boundaries and limitations, but not dampen that experience for the child in terms of that nurturing? So what can we control as a parent? So understanding, teens at this point, there is a lot more. We might have some, I'm so sorry. Understanding where our teens are at developmentally, we might feel more inclined to approach our teens with a little bit more empathy. After all, they do have a lot that's going on, but all that compassion in the world while trying to nurturing their independence. It doesn't mean that as a parent, there's not going to be times where you're feeling agitated or frustrated. It also doesn't mean that you are going to be excusing poor choices from our teens. So how do we manage these kinds of responsibilities? So a quick motto that we like to go by here is keeping it simple. Event plus response equals an outcome. So this is kind of a fundamental strategy that we can use as parents, and really and truly in any kind of situation with anyone that we're dealing with. And the idea is that we cannot control another person. And the only thing that we have control over is how we choose to respond. And if we choose to respond in a more strategic and mindful way, the likelihood of having a positive outcome has increased. So instead of trying to control our teens' behavior, you want to be trying to refocus on controlling how you're going to respond to it as a parent. So as the adult, you have a much more broad and experienced perspective than our teens. So at this stage, so you're going to be in that seat of control and trying to take more responsibility for trying to create a more positive outcome. So with that in mind, let's look at just a couple of scenarios, typical scenarios that we find in managing teens. So my teen overreacts all the time. So we hear that, like we just established, so teens can be much more sensitive and their emotional responses can be much more intense. In our minds, we're just thinking they're being dramatic. This is so unnecessary. Why do you have to be like this? These are some of the things that you might be telling yourself as a parent. But now understanding kind of that developmental process and what's actually taking place in their brain, we might have a little bit more empathy for what they're going through. So in this kind of situation, instead of, labeling or becoming critical to our teen and telling them to simply calm down or dismissing their feelings, what you want to do as the parent is try to really own in on the listening. So you want to try not to react when teens are expressing these strong emotions by being dismissive. You also don't want to become emotionally reactive, in which you are becoming angry or frustrated or having the same level of emotional response. So taking that time to kind of sit back and listen, also validating their feelings. So you don't want to belittle or minimize what it is that they're experiencing. So even in our minds as parents who are fully matured and we know that it's not a big deal, and their teen brain, this is an absolute big deal. This feels like the end of the world. So it might not be the end of the world, but in them, they are experiencing it as if it is. So acknowledging and validating their feelings. At this stage here, you're really also going to be trying to help your teen to identify what that emotion is. You're going to hear those kinds of scenarios that it just sucks and it's horrible and it's, you don't love me, and all of those very dramatic responses. But trying to sit down and listen in a way where you can help them to identify. So it sounds like you're angry. Are you feeling angry? Are you feeling frustrated? Trying to get them to identify exactly what that feeling is. Also, normalizing the emotion, because we too often want to try to say that being angry is a negative thing, when in fact, every emotion serves a purpose, whether it's feeling happy, sad, angry, or frustrated. Every emotion is going to have a purpose. So helping them to identify that will also help them know how to handle and manage that emotion in the correct way. So feeling angry, for instance, it's not okay to throw things or damage things, but it is okay to feel angry. And what are you going to do with that? Once you're able to kind of get to that stage, also giving your team the space to kind of feel those emotions, giving them the space to be able to diffuse, to breathe through whatever that is that they're experiencing. And from there, we can kind of move into that problem solving. Now that we know what this emotion is, you're in a better state of being able to process and problem solve. Let's work together to try to reframe those thoughts. So an example could be in this situation, your child is coming home from school. They're very overreactive at this stage. You're wanting to know what's happening, and they disclose to you that someone at school is speaking things that are untrue of them. And we know that that's a common challenge for our teens, a lot of gossip, peer pressure, and such. So in this situation, even using that E plus R equals O model could be something that you help to teach to them. So in that kind of situation, you as a team, you can't control what other people are saying, but you can control the way that you react. So teaching them as well can help them to kind of foster their own control over the situation and making them feel like they have a little bit more say in how things are going to go. Moving on here, my teen is making stupid choices. So here is, again, going back to that video, at this stage in development, our teens our sense of consequential thinking is definitely off or a little bit delayed, a little bit more impulsive, looking for that instant gratification, as opposed to kind of thinking things through as strategically. They're looking for that experience and pursuing things that are interest to them. So in that moment when you're feeling like, well, this was just stupid and they should have known better. And this can stray from something as simple as just doing something silly at school to even more riskier behaviors such as, abusing substances, whether that be alcohol or drugs. In that kind of situation, you want to kind of sit down and gather more information. And what we're going to find with teens at this stage, listening is going to be your gift. That's going to be your key. Spending that time and listening. Teens want to feel heard. So taking that time to gather information, asking those open-ended questions that gets their buy-in. Okay, well, mom and dad want to understand what I'm going through right now. So they might feel more inclined to share. What is the reason for why they did what they did? Also then from there, trying to identify their values and goals, connecting that with the things that are important to them and the things that are important to your family. So if you know that speaking kindly and respecting others is a value of your family and of your teenager, tapping into that, connecting how their behavior doesn't align with something that's important to them. Your teen, for instance, wants to go to college. It's their dream to go to college. They see themselves traveling. Connecting how some of these risky behaviors jeopardize those goals for them. And it's not your goals. It's not so much what you're setting that stage. It's things that are important to them, things that they have expressed as important, and you're only tapping into what they have identified. In this kind of situation as well, you really want to try to avoid forbidding or lecturing. We know very often when we see teens and you're trying to tell them what to do, they're just going to do the opposite. They're that rebellious nature. So if you're sitting there and you're having that conversation of because I said so, or not involving them in that conversation, they're going to feel more inclined to just shut down, to not participate in the conversation. Well, at that point, it's not necessarily a conversation because you're the only person doing the talking. So those open-ended questions are a way to really try to stem away from that lecturing and because I said so kind of conversations. So next we have here my teen doesn't want to talk. So at this stage, again, it can always bring it back to that biological standpoint and where our kids are at. There's so much going on for them. They are being swayed in so many different directions. There's so much influence within the world. And what do they want to talk? It's more cool to talk to friends than it is cool to talk to parents. And at this point, it can be very challenging for parents because you want to ensure that your teen is okay. You're seeing them feeling more isolated and not as engaged with you in conversation. So that can be very challenging. And I think that's okay for you as parents to feel because you just want to ensure that your teenager is okay. So at this stage, you can't force them to talk. So constantly asking questions, overburdening, nagging them, trying to force them into conversation will most likely have that opposite effect. But always being available to them, showing that support, always being that listening ear, reminding them that you are available to them when they're ready to speak. And again, always validating their experiences. So you can't force them to talk, but always being available will make your teen more inclined to want to talk with you. My teen is so lazy. So in this kind of situation, what we're really looking at is, I think that's just by nature. Teens are lazy. They're not going to want to be cleaning their rooms. They don't want to participate in activities. They don't want to do their chores. They have social media and life and friends that are much more important. But I think it's important to be mindful of the fact that considering all of the developmental changes that they're going through, teens are also going to be more exhausted. Not to say that, again, not excusing it, but having a bit more of an empathy, coming from a different perspective of, they have a lot that is going on for them as well, and maybe it's not laziness. So as you as a parent, picking your battles, knowing what is worth it for you. So avoid at this point setting unrealistic expectations. So sitting there thinking that every day that your teen comes home, he's going to clean his room from top to bottom, that room is always going to be in tip-top shape. There won't be anything left on the floor. It's a little bit more unrealistic, right? So picking your battles, knowing what's of value, and thinking of the long game. So nagging, being that kind of way, might end up working against you in the long game, which is establishing a relationship with your teen. And remembering that these things are temporary. These things are temporary, and they will eventually identify as well the way that they can improve these lifestyles. What do teens want from parents? And it's quite simple at this stage. Teens are in search for their own freedoms and their independence. As parents, you want to really focus in on loving them unconditionally. Reminding them that you always have their backs, even when they mess up, because they certainly will. So coming from that position of not being judgmental, understanding that some of these behaviors are typical, not condoning it to say that it's okay, but fostering that relationship in which you and your teens can openly discuss these from a place of non-judgment and validating their experiences and their feelings, not being dismissive, understanding that even when they mess up, that you're still going to be there for them. Teens at this stage also want to be listened to. Doesn't mean that they're always going to want to talk, but they do want to feel like that they're always being listened to. So as parents, really tap into figuring out what are their interests, asking those open-ended questions, showing understanding and compassion for what it is that they're going through. Again, not minimizing the small things. So even though as a parent you think, okay, that debate or that incident that happened at school between between peers was trivial, that wasn't a big deal. For them, it's not. So again, talk about those small things. Don't wait for things to get big and out of control, and validate all of their experiences. Another important part here is also modeling that behavior. We want for kids to give that undivided attention and to step away from the distractions of TVs and cell phones. And it's important as parents that you're modeling that behavior. So if you expect that undivided attention and that level of respect, then it's also modeling that to them. So when they're talking, giving them that full disclosure, full undivided attention. Another important part here is to see consistency. So making your home a place of stability and safety. When teens feel safe, this is where they will probably push boundaries. So if you're seeing your teen kind of push these boundaries, that means that they're feeling safe within your home. Again, it's not condoning some of the behaviors, but it's about how do you balance that. As parents, this is a good time when you're seeing these boundaries being pushed to really talk about the values that are important for your teen and you as a family. So we want to try to find, okay, what is important for this family so that everybody can feel safe. So if there's these constant emotional outbursts and these risky behaviors that are against those family values, well, where can we balance this out? So having those open discussions, having your teen feel included and identifying those values and understanding and making clear expectations of, what does that look like? How do we foster these values in this home? So as well, when we talk about, the modeling of behavior, your teen is still watching you. So even though they seem like they're plugged into those phones and they're a little less engaged, but as we saw from that video, they're always learning. Their learning is at their highest point right now. So practicing your self-care as a parent and your own emotional regulation skills are going to be imperative for the success of your relationship with your teen. So practice pausing, displaying empathy, displaying that emotional management in terms of when you're feeling frustrated, identifying how you're feeling, and showing those breathing techniques or whatever you do that can mindfully, bring you back to a safe place of being able to express how you're feeling and to problem solve. So just going into a couple of stats here, it says globally 1 in 7 between 10 to 19-year-olds experience a mental disorder. That equals 13% of the global burden of disease in this age group. Some of the common things that we see amongst teens are depression, anxiety, and behavioral disorders that are a leading cause of illness and disability. There's also suicide is the 4th leading cause of death among 15 to 19-year-olds. So I share this with you tonight, not because to scare you or to create labels, but just to highlight the reality of the situation when it comes to teens. Considering society, where it's going, the challenges that teens experience trying to grow, there is always that element of mental health. That's very important. So for tonight, we've brought in Miss Anoush Pal from Infinite Mindcare, and she's going to be offering some of her clinical expertise and when common teenage behaviors, such as the risky behaviors, some of the emotional outbursts, have kind of crossed that threshold from what is normal teenage expectation or expected behaviors into a clinical concern. So if I can invite Miss Anoush to join us.
Hello.
Hi, how are you tonight?
Well, thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
No, thank you for joining us. So as I mentioned, Miss Anoush is from Infinite Mindcare. And if you want to take a second and just share a little bit about your background, then we can dive into some of the questions.
Sure, of course. Yeah. So I am I'm a behavior analyst as well as an aspiring clinical psychologist. I'm just in the last stages of my doctoral project in clinical psychology. And so I'm working at Infinite Mindcare mainly with teens and families as I accrue my supervised hours towards my licensure. So I've been in the field of mental health for about 15 years now. And I particularly love working with teens and children. And so I'm really excited to be here. And thank you so much for inviting me.
Yes, no, thank you so much for joining us. And we're so happy to have you here. So, as we've discussed a little bit for this session, it's just looking at some of the common behaviors and challenges that parents might face with teen parenting. But like we talked about, there are some maybe common mental health disorders or challenges that are actually more profound in the community these days. So in your profession and your experience, what are some of the common mental health disorders that you have been seeing among teenagers?
Yeah, particularly, I guess, in the last year, I would say, I've seen a lot more teens present with heightened anxiety is probably the first thing that I would identify. And what that means or what it looks like from a clinical standpoint, I think a lot of people have anxiety generally in our lives, but where that kind of crosses the threshold is when you see your teen very preoccupied with the same thoughts or thought over and over, or really wondering what their place is in their social circle, needing that reassurance. Those are kind of those markers that we see where anxiety is playing the biggest role. The other one I see a lot of here is depression. And again, depression is a difficult one to define because we use it so colloquially, but it is a lot of times parents can pick up on signs of depression when their child is just exhibiting kind of apathy, not really taking interest in things. And I'll preface that by saying it's not just not taking interest in things that they used to find interesting, but just not taking interest in things in general. Because as you were noting, Rachel, this is a time of neural growth and interests change and shift at the drop of a hat. So that's part of the coming of age process. But when you see that kind of low energy or just really not being interested by anything and withdrawing, right. That's one of the things that we see a lot of. We do also encounter eating disorders fairly frequently on island. There's a lot of pressure about, especially I guess in the world of social media that we live in, to look a certain way and to be a certain way, and eating disorders tie into this sense of loss of control as you're kind of coming of age. And so restricted eating or overeating can be something that we see a lot of here. Right.
Okay. So you highlighted again, so like depression, anxiety, some of the eating disorders are some of the common challenges that you're seeing within the mental health for teenagers. Yeah. Are there any key signs and symptoms that parents should be looking at and just something much more obvious or alarming for parents when trying to identify more clinical? Yeah, absolutely. My best rule of thumb is, and as a behavior analyst, I think this has guided me throughout most of my time working with children, is your child best. So what you're looking for, instead of a list of things that could be considered red flags, really want you looking at what are the changes in behavior. Did something change? It can be a dramatic change or it could be a slow happening change. But that's the question I think you should ask yourselves as a parent of a teenager. When you start to notice something has changed, that's when those skills that you just talked about, listening, with that non-judgmental approach, just trying to figure out what's going on, because there might be something bigger going on that could need to be addressed in a more therapeutic setting. So it's changes in behavior, and some of those changes might be more reactivity, more decreased mood. And it's hard because, as you identified, those are some of the common things that just happen as being a teenager. I would say that the biggest indicator or when to know something is potentially needs a second look is when there's a change in behavior and you're noticing habits changing, withdrawal from social situations, or excessively risk-taking behavior.
at that point, the first step is to try and talk to them and listen. And if you can't really parse out what's going on, that's when I would recommend seeking somebody to talk to for them.
Right. Okay. So it sounds to like, parents having a little bit more of that parenting confidence, like, your child, right? Your teen. So, when you're observing, when you're seeing those changes, kind of also what's normal and what's not normal. And when that kind of trusting your kind of parental judgment, exactly. I suppose, right?
Exactly. Trusting your gut, trusting your judgment, and also knowing that the even if your relationship is strained, because relationships go through periods of strain and coming back together, but try and take those signals as a time to reconnect and just take it upon yourself to say, okay, that's my signal to maybe see if I can see what's going on. And if I can't, that's okay too. But exactly, trust that you are the expert on your child initially, because you're going to be the one to first see those signs.
Absolutely. So so let's say as a parent now, you have kind of, been observing and assessing your teen for some time. You're thinking, okay, well, I'm seeing some red flags here that, I'm just not sure how to deal with. My teen is really struggling here. It's time to get some help. So what kind of intervention or treatment might be accessible, are common forms of treatment for teens in this?
Well, I think definitely the first thing, if you're a parent looking at resources or looking to find a counselor to meet with your child, I think that the first thing to know is that not all counselors work with teens. So make sure that when you're looking around and you're meeting with different people, just ask them sort of what is their comfort level. You can feel comfortable interviewing the counselor to make sure it's a good fit for your child. So really that's the first thing in terms of finding a good connection and finding a good practitioner, is just making sure that you find someone who works with children in the first place, or teens specifically. And then what does that look like when you get started in therapy with a teenager? We assess what their needs are, what their communication style is, how much they want to dive into communication, how slowly they might want to go into it. So, but as a general framework, the clinician will pick a strategy that's going to work best for your child. It will be individualized. Some of the ones that I use quite a lot are just cognitive behavioral strategies, as well as mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, which is really bringing your child back to the moment. A lot of what you discussed earlier, Rachael, is about all the changes in the brain that are happening. And it can be this flood of change and emotions and just making sense of the world as you get older. That's really hard. And so I've found those interventions that help somebody come back to the present moment, take stock of what's right around them, and am I safe right here and now? Am I good? How do I feel right here and now? Get them back and connected with the present moment has been really effective for teens, because they're always in a million places in their heads. They're in their social networks online, they're in school, and so acceptance and commitment therapy and mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, I think are really, those are the ones I lean on a lot just to get back to the basics.
Absolutely. Thanks for that. Yeah. So, if at that point then your teen has started some form of therapy, what should parents expect in terms of their role in supporting their child?
That's a fabulous question, because I think that needs to be clarified from the outset. Parents are an integral part of the team for your child's progress. We do it together, right? You're not just going to send your child to therapy and hope everything gets resolved. It's really a relationship in the whole family network. And so on the one hand, parents should expect and know that there's a confidentiality relationship between the child and the therapist, wherein I can't tell you what your child says in therapy. That's really privileged information, and I want to create that therapeutic space for them to be able to tell me what is going on. At the same time, we can meet with parents and we can talk with parents about progress, and any time that there's those parent meetings, I'll inform my teenager, I'm going to meet with your parents. Let's make sure that we're on the same page with our goals. I want to report back to them how you're doing. Is there anything you want me to share? Is there anything difficult that you want me to kind of breach with them? So that's a really parent meetings following my individual sessions are a great way for parents to stay involved. And then sometimes as well, parents, based on what we're doing in therapy with the teenager, parents might get involved and come to the sessions at the comfort level of the teenager. Sometimes that's the thing they want to work on. They want to bridge their relationship with their parent better, or they want to work on communication, and they want to kind of work through some of the injustices that are happening. And so we just, with the child's permission, we invite the parent in, and we have fabulous collaboration really in those sessions. A lot of times I strive to get to that point, if that's the issue, where we can have parents join to be part of that therapeutic process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's so helpful. So, even though therapy might seem like a very private matter between like therapists and the teenager, and it's like just the issues that the teenager is trying to address, it's not really like that. It's really that it's a family matter in which, that parents, they're crucial still to the change process for the teenagers.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And again, that slide that you put up there about the event and the response equals the outcome, I think that's really salient here, because in a family system, everybody has different events and different responses. So all of those outcomes get intermixed. And so when a child comes, or a teenager comes to therapy, we look at it from that perspective of the whole context of how the communication dynamic in the family might be working for it, and bring parents into that process.
Absolutely. So we're coming out on our end here. Like we mentioned, you're from Infinite Mindcare, and your experience is very wide-reaching when it comes to your work with teens. So, just speaking for your institution, your agency, what kind of services might be accessible with you guys?
Yeah, we have just sort of expanded our offerings for adolescents and teenagers. Typically before it was just for adults, but we've added 2 other clinicians onto our team that really are most comfortable with teenagers. So that's exciting within our agency. We have that option for one-to-one therapy, and also that parent collaboration piece, which goes along with one-to-one therapy. There are other providers on island, absolutely. It's just important to, when you go shopping around, to look for different providers, making sure that it's written in their kind of description that's the age group that they like to work with.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's an important thing to remember. Even as a parent, you might be accessing your own kind of individual therapy. And if that's a success, it might be like, oh, well, let's go take them to my therapist. They're so good. Yeah. But
absolutely. And I think it's important for us as therapists, I will say, what's outside of my comfort zone, what's not. And so I think parents, when you're looking around, it's sort of really difficult to figure out, well, what's what, is a therapist is all the same in it. Yeah, we've all got the same skills, but what's most practiced and what, comes most naturally to us is important for sure.
Absolutely. All right, Anoush, I really want to thank you for taking the time to kind of answer some of those questions. If you don't mind just hanging around a bit, just in case there is any questions that we can answer at the end from anybody who might pose any in the chat. So thank you again for that and your input. So just moving along here, just expanding on some of the services that are available island-wide. In terms of upcoming programs here at the Department of Counseling Services, the Counseling Center is similar to what Ms. Powell talked about. They're offering a program right now that's based in the acceptance and commitment therapy. So this is using experiential mediums to support teenagers who may be struggling with anxiety, depression, or both. They're using like painting and clay and allowing them to kind of explore their own experiences and challenges without kind of getting caught up in that language process. So kind of just bringing it from a different platform and connecting with teens. This is for girls and boys aged anywhere between 12 and 17 years old. So that's actually starting on September 8th, 4:30 to 6 p.m. And you can call the Department of Counseling Services to register or send us an email. And we'll provide those details shortly. From the Family Resource Center, we also have P Positive Parenting Program that's focused specifically on teens. And this group is an 8-week session delivered individually and in a group format. And this is to encourage working with parents who have teenagers or children who may be engaged or concerned about risky or challenging behaviors, or just trying to promote those teen development and support their child in making some good decisions. So for that there, I will put a link in the chat as well, so if anyone is interested, they can register using that link. Or for more information, you can also email us at frc@gov.ky. In addition to some other resources, many may be familiar already with the Alex Panton Foundation. So this is something that's specific for teens as well. They have a virtual support group that is offered twice per month. It was on pause for some time, but it's actually resuming on Saturday, September 3rd. So if you have your phones nearby, you can scan that barcode there for the flyer with some more information. Also keep an eye out on their social media because they will be posting some more information about this, the start of the virtual support group. I've also provided their website and their email address should you want to have any information, have any questions or want some more information about that. That is also available for teenagers from 13 to 17. So as we wrap up here, we do have the chat, which you can feel free to pop in any questions that you might have. And I just want to leave with you as parents, again, it's a lot of information in a very short time. So this platform is not a one-stop fix-all, for sure. But after tonight, we really hope that, it's just a couple of, quick and easy strategies that you can use with your kid, with your teenager. Also kind of create that opportunity for you to kind of reflect on what your teens might be experiencing on a day-to-day basis, considering the challenges of growing up in our society, some of the biological and developmental changes that they're experiencing. And, what can you do as a parent today? Whether that be, just taking more time to listen, to validate their experiences, just to do little things that kind of develop that mutual respect and that bonding with your child, with your teenager. So if you have any questions, like we said, please feel free to pop them in the chat and we'll hang around for just a few more minutes. There's also a poll that will be sent out in the chat, and I would very much appreciate if you guys can take just a few minutes of your time, maybe even one, I think it's quite short, to answer, give your feedback and evaluation of how this presentation went. So thank you all for joining in tonight. And let's see if there's any questions. We have one question. I take it very personally, some of the things they say to me sometimes. It causes a rift. Help. So, yes, I think, certainly, again, I don't think in trying to be more empathic or understanding of those teenagers, it's not to dismiss your feelings as a parent, because teenagers, I think, can say things that sometimes can be very hurtful. And I think as a parent, you should also feel in a position that you can express the way that comments make you feel. So it's not to say that your feelings should go onto the sidelines. So even if it's in that moment, taking that minute, using that mindfulness strategy to, again, regain your composure, modeling that behavior of taking those deep breaths and taking that time to your child to just say, what you said actually was very hurtful to me. I did not like the way that made me feel, and I don't feel that's truthful. Or, having that open and honest conversation. Trying to be mindful of responding strategically as opposed to just reacting out of emotion. But it's not to say that your emotions should be dismissed or minimized either. And it's hoping that through that kind of a conversation, that they become more mindful of the impact that their words have on you and other people. Another thing also to consider is the use of I statements. So coming away from statements such as "you made me feel," as opposed to taking ownership, modeling that taking ownership of your own feelings. So when you said this, I felt frustrated when this happened, right? I have a comment here. We are still learning. And exactly, I think, be graceful to yourselves as parents. It's a learning process for your teen, but also for yourself. Humanize the process. We're all people. We all have feelings, whether that be as a parent or as the teen. And I think, like I said, just as we're empathic to our teens, be kind to yourselves as parents as well. All right. Well, I think that's all of our questions tonight. Ms. Anoush, I want to thank you again for taking the time to join in with us. If anyone hasn't completed the poll, please take just a second out of your time to give us your feedback. Again, I would encourage anybody who's tuned in tonight to just, follow along on Family Resource, Instagram, Facebook, on our website for more information on upcoming programs. Also, feel free to give us a call, 949-0006, or send us an email at frc@gov.ky. We'll feel free to give you any more information that you need regarding the programs or register your interest. So thank you all. But anyways, you guys have a wonderful night and drive safe if you're on the road. Have a good one. Bye-bye.
Thanks again for joining the Family Resource Center tonight for another episode of Rethink Parenting. If you'd like any additional support or more information, please feel free to contact the Family Resource Center at 949-0006 or send us an email at frc@gov.ky. Thanks again and have a wonderful night.
The Family Resource Center invite you to join us Tuesday nights at 8 p.m. on Bobo 89.1 FM for our weekly show called Rethink Parenting, where we share practical and positive parenting information to support happy, healthy family life. We'll share how to handle day-to-day issues. We'll address common challenges with parenting, such as how to manage misbehavior, supporting our teens through growing up, managing co-parenting dynamics, and how to take care of ourselves and manage our own stressors. Family Resource Center, committed to building people, building families. Tune in Tuesday nights, 8 p.m. on Bobo 89.1 FM. Find us at frc.gov.ky or call us on 949-0006. Submit your questions and concerns regarding parenting to us, and we'll share them on air. Join us Tuesday nights at 8 p.m. for our weekly show called Rethink Parenting.